Okay, listeners, settle in because we're kicking off this deep dive with a number that really caught our eye. 840 million euros.
840 million euros. Yeah, just let that sink in for a second.
And exactly. And that figure is linked directly to a concept we're exploring today, a community energy model. And it hints at, well, a potentially massive economic impact. It feels almost contradictory, doesn't it, for a local community thing?
It does. It really makes you ask, how can something designed, to serve local needs and deliver social benefits possibly generate value on that kind of huge scale?
Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're plunging into a fascinating stack of source material, all centered around this model known as social synergy and its potential implications for Cyprus's energy future.
And we've got quite a mix of sources, haven't we?
We do. We're pulling insights from an in-depth analysis of the model itself, some strategic notes about how you might implement it, excerpts from Cyprus's official National Energy and Climate Plan, you might hear that, called the NECP, and even details from relevant EU funding calls. So a pretty broad picture.
And together, these sources don't just give us a surface view, they provide a really detailed, kind of multifaceted perspective. They lay out the why behind this model, the how it's designed to work, its potential impacts, both social and economic, which is key, and the broader strategic context it fits into. So our mission really is to methodically unpack all of this, pull out the most important insights, and help you understand what makes this model tick and, well, why it matters.
Okay, let's start by setting the scene, because the sources make it really clear that social synergy wasn't just dreamed up in a vacuum. It's designed to tackle some pretty significant interconnected challenges facing Cyprus right now.
That's right. The material we have highlights the urgent need for a clean energy transition, moving away from fossil fuels towards renewables. But this transition isn't happening in an easy social landscape. There are existing issues of social inequality.
Yeah.
And critically, a significant problem with energy poverty, where households genuinely struggle to afford the energy they need just for basic living.
Energy poverty is a big one, and the sources actually put a number on it for Cyprus, didn't they?
They did. The analysis points out that 67,350 households in Cyprus are currently considered to be in energy poverty.
Wow, 67,000. That's a substantial number of people facing hardship.
It really is. And a key reason they struggle often is just a lack of capital. They simply don't have the upfront money to invest in things like rooftop solar panels or, energy efficiency upgrades, even if those things would save them money down the line.
And this is where the sources introduce a useful contrast. To really understand what makes social synergy different, they first describe a more, let's say, traditional model. They call it Ergo 11.
Exactly. Ergo 11 is presented as a kind of baseline, a typical investment project in the energy sector. It's designed with a very clear, very traditional objective, maximizing financial return and profitability, specifically for the person or entity providing the capital, the investor.
And the numbers they give for Ergo 11 really underline that investor-focused logic, don't they?
They do. They detail that this model requires a high initial investment from the investor. We're talking $120,425 of their own capital needing to be put down upfront.
Okay, $120,000. That's a significant barrier for most individuals, and certainly impossible for any household already struggling with energy poverty.
Absolutely. But for the investor putting that money in, the model is designed to be highly efficient. The analysis cites an impressive internal rate of return, that's the IRR, of 13.44%.
Right, the IRR, that's the metric investors use to gauge profitability. And 13.44% is considered pretty strong, isn't it?
It is, yeah, very solid. And coupled with that, the sources note a very fast equity payback period for the investor, just 2 years.
2 years to get their initial stake back.
That's right. It means the investor recoups their initial capital relatively quickly through the project's returns.
So from a purely financial investment angle, Rzlevin makes perfect sense. You put in a large sum, you expect a strong return, and you get it back fast. But, like you said, it doesn't inherently address the challenges of energy poverty or that huge capital barrier for the vast majority of people who don't just have 120,000 naga lying around.
Precisely. That's the critical point of contrast the sources are building towards. Ergo 11 is a viable financial model for those who already have capital, but it's not a solution designed to be accessible to everyone or to tackle those systemic social issues like energy poverty.
Which brings us directly then to the social synergy model. The sources pivot here and immediately highlight what makes it fundamentally different, starting right with that barrier we just talked about, the upfront cost.
And the difference is, well, it's stark. Zero initial investment required from the members of the energy community. It's zero upfront for the households, the small businesses, whoever joins this community.
Zero. Okay, that's genuinely revolutionary, especially when you remember that statistic about over 67,000 households in energy poverty, specifically because they lack capital. So if members aren't paying up front, how is the project financed? Where does that initial investment actually come from?
So the core logic presented in the sources is that the members are not burdened with any upfront capital costs at all. The initial investment needed to build the infrastructure, the solar panels, the batteries, the software, it's covered by other sources. The analysis explicitly mentions subsidies and loans as the main funding mechanisms for getting it built.
Okay, so the money comes from elsewhere, initially. Maybe government programs, EU funds, perhaps commercial loans. But someone still has to pay back those loans eventually, right? Yeah. How does that happen if the members aren't paying up front or maybe aren't even paying the full value of their energy bill right away?
That's the, let's call it the ingenious design feature described in the sources. The loans and all the other predictable running costs of the system, they're structured to be repaid through the energy savings and the value generated by the project itself over time. Yeah. The system is explicitly designed to be self-funding through the economic benefits it creates.
So the value created by generating and managing the energy doesn't just immediately translate into savings for the members. Some of that value gets funneled back into the system to cover its own costs and pay back that initial investment. For this to work, the cost structure must be incredibly well thought out.
And the sources really emphasize that. The analysis explicitly states that the social synergy model has comprehensively accounted for all foreseeable cost parameters. This level of detail is what ensures the model's robustness and long-term viability. It's not based on, just hand-waving about future savings. It's built on a calculated cost recovery plan.
Right. So what is the primary cost component identified in the sources that covers these things? How is it structured?
The main component discussed is structured as a rate per kilowatt hour consumed by the member, 0.110 per kilowatt hour.
Oh, wait, 11 cents per kilowatt hour.
Yeah. And this rate is designed to cover two things initially. First, the repayment of the loans that funded the initial build, and second, the creation and ongoing funding of something called the social fund.
Okay, let's pause on that social fence, because that seems to be where this model goes beyond just energy economics and becomes potentially a really powerful social engine.
It absolutely does. The sources describe this social fund mechanism as one of the most, revolutionary aspects of the whole model. That euro 0.110 per kilowatt hour component you pay initially, it covers both loan repayment and the social fund. But here's the critical shift. After the initial 3.5 years, that's the period they estimate is needed for the main loan repayment, the analysis states that the portion of that euro 0.110 per kilowatt hour rate that was previously going to loan repayment, it gets redirected entirely to fuel the social fund.
Hold on. So for the first 3.5 years, part of that 11 cents per kilowatt hour pays off the debt that built the system?
Right.
Then, after that debt is cleared, that same slice of the payment, which was already baked into the system's economics, just starts piling up in a fund for the community.
Exactly. The sources describe this as a really powerful mechanism for social redistribution. The financial value generated by the energy system, once its initial capital costs are covered, it doesn't just disappear or get siphoned off to external investors like in the traditional model.
Right.
Instead, it becomes a dedicated, self-sustaining resource belonging directly to the energy community members to be managed by them for their collective benefit.
That's a profound difference, isn't it? Energy generation becomes a continuous source of funding for community stuff, year after year, without needing new taxes or endless grant applications. The value is just built into the operational cost from day one.
Precisely. It's a direct link between achieving energy independence and empowering the community financially.
But none of this happens without the underlying technology working smoothly. The sources describe a system that's quite a bit more sophisticated than just sticking solar panels on roofs.
Yeah, they highlight a smart combination of the physical flow of energy and some pretty sophisticated digital management, all orchestrated by advanced AI software.
Okay, let's break that down, starting with the physical flow. Where does the electricity actually go?
Okay, so based on the sources, the physical flow is designed with grid stability and efficiency in mind. All the electricity generated by the PV panels owned by the energy community members goes entirely to the central grid, specifically to the Electricity Authority of Cyprus, or EAHK.
All of it. Directly to the grid.
All of it. Then, when a member in the community needs power, to turn on their lights or run their fridge, they draw it directly from the EHK grid, just like any other electricity customer. And similarly, the energy community's shared battery storage systems also charge and discharge from and to the EAHK grid.
So wait, if my solar panels produce, say, 10 kilowatt, all 10 kilowatters go into the main network, and then when I need 1 kilowatt later, I just pull it back from that same network. It feels a bit counterintuitive not to use the energy directly from my own roof if it's sunny.
It does seem that way at first glance, yeah. But that's where the digital layer comes in, and it's the core innovation described in the sources. They refer to it as virtual net metering, or compensation. The physical flow goes to the grid, but the accounting and the management are virtual and intelligent.
Okay, explain this virtual part then. How does sending everything to the grid actually benefit the member or the community in the end?
Right. It starts with something the sources call energy capital creation. Every single kilowatt hour produced by a member system and exported to the grid is accurately recorded by their smart meter. Now, the sum of all these exports from all the members across the entire energy community isn't just lost into the grid. It's logistically credited to a virtual account managed by the energy community's software platform.
Okay, so like a community energy bank account.
Exactly like that. Think of it like that. This total credited amount represents the collective energy capital the community has generated and effectively deposited into the grid system.
So the community builds up this virtual credit on the grid based on the total solar production of all its members.
Got it. Now, how does this energy capital help when a member actually turns on a light switch and consumes power?
This is where the real-time demand coverage and compensation mechanism kicks in, powered by that AI software. It's crucial. When a member, say at their home or maybe their small shop, consumes electricity from the grid, their smart meter instantly signals this consumption event to the central AI software managing the energy community.
Instantly.
Almost simultaneously, we're talking near real time. The AI software analyzes the situation and instructs the energy community's shared battery storage systems to inject the exact same amount of energy that the member just consumed back into the grid, potentially at a different, strategically chosen point on the network.
Wait, hang on. So if I use 1 kilowatt from the grid, the AI tells a battery somewhere else in the community system to push 1 kilowatt back into the grid right then and there. That's the described process, yes. The AI is continuously monitoring consumption across the whole community and also knows the state of charge of the batteries and predicted solar production. It orchestrates these injections. The energy for this compensation comes from the community's collective energy capital, essentially drawn from the energy stored in those batteries, which were charged earlier using the collective solar exports.
I see.
This mechanism ensures that the energy community's overall impact on the grid is balanced, or at least controlled. They are essentially returning the energy consumed by their members in real time, drawn from their own self-generated collective pool. It's like using that energy bank account to cover withdrawals instantly.
That's incredibly sophisticated. It's not just about generating power anymore. It's about actively managing consumption and injection in a way that actually serves the grid itself.
Exactly. And this active real-time balancing and injection service is precisely what turns the model into what the sources refer to as a virtual power plant, or VPP.
Right, VPP. We hear that term a lot.
Yeah. By aggregating and intelligently controlling all these distributed energy resources, the members' virtual energy capital, the shared batteries, the energy community effectively acts like a single large power plant from the grid's perspective, but one that's made up of many smaller distributed parts, all coordinated.
This raises a really important point, though. How does EAHK, the grid operator, benefit from this seemingly complex arrangement? Does this just make their life more complicated, trying to manage all this?
That's a fair question, but the source analysis makes a strong case that the energy community actually becomes a strategic partner for EAHK, not just a complicated customer. Think about it. Renewable sources like solar can be intermittent, right? Sunny one minute, cloudy the next. That makes the grid harder to manage and keep stable. By acting as a VPP, the social synergy model provides valuable grid services. It helps balance the network by injecting power precisely when and where it's needed to compensate for local consumption. It could potentially participate in frequency regulation, helping keep the whole system stable. And ultimately, it makes integrating much larger amounts of variable renewables. The sources even mention enabling 100% RES integration much easier and more stable for EHK.
So the service itself has value.
Absolutely. The sources emphasize that this active stabilization and balancing service has significant value for the grid operator. They're not just buying power, they're getting stability services.
Okay, so the grid gets a partner that makes managing renewables easier. And what about the members again? What are the guarantees for them?
Yes, beyond the zero initial cost, which is huge, the sources highlight key benefits for the members. A stable price for their electricity, insulated from the volatility you see in the wider energy market.
Which is a big deal right now.
A very big deal. And critically, the sources mention zero risk of cutoffs because they are always drawing from and compensating the grid within this managed collective system. The analysis concludes that the brilliance lies in creating a system where benefits flow not just down to the end users, but also up to the crucial grid infrastructure itself.
Okay, let's talk about the scale of this potential impact. The sources include some specific calculations, don't they? Detailing what a, say, 1,000-member energy community operating under this social synergy model could actually achieve.
They do, and the numbers presented are very compelling. For a community of that size, just 1,000 members, the analysis projects approximately $420,000 in annual direct savings for the members.
$420,000 a year. Just from lower electricity bills for those 1,000 participants, that's a significant amount of money staying directly in the households and the small businesses involved.
It really is. The sources frame this as a tangible and immediate increase in disposable income for those people. You can imagine what that means for family budgets or the viability of a small local shop.
Absolutely. But then, as we discussed earlier, there's the social fund. What do the numbers say about that?
Right. The calculations show annual inflows of approximately $550,000 into this fund after that initial 3.5-year period, once the loan repayment portion shifts over.
Over €500,000 flowing annually into a fund that belongs collectively to the community. That's a massive self-generated resource.
It truly is. The sources highlight this as a huge ongoing asset that the community can democratically decide how to use. It could fund, well, almost anything: local environmental projects, extra support for vulnerable residents, maybe community infrastructure improvements, educational programs, or even further investments in energy efficiency for members who need it most.
And this brings us back squarely to that problem of energy poverty we started with. With those 67,350 households in Cyprus lacking the capital to invest, how does social synergy directly address that specific group?
This is perhaps where the model has its most profound social impact, according to the sources. The critical barrier for these households, as we said, is the upfront cost of adopting cleaner, cheaper energy tech. The social synergy model just eliminates this barrier entirely by requiring zero initial investment from members.
Because the financing is covered elsewhere.
Exactly. As we discussed, it's 100% covered by subsidies and loans, which are then repaid later through the system's own generated savings and value.
So it's not just a theoretical solution. It's specifically designed to include those who are currently shut out of the energy transition simply because they don't have the money.
Exactly. It's designed as a practical, accessible mechanism. And the analysis even quantifies the impact on energy-poor households. It estimates a direct 24% reduction in their electricity costs.
24%. A nearly quarter reduction in a major household expense like electricity. That's substantial for a family struggling financially.
It is. Hugely substantial. The sources emphasize that this frees up money for other essential needs. Food, healthcare, education for the kids. They don't just call this energy policy. They explicitly frame it as highly targeted and effective social policy, offering sustainable, ongoing relief to vulnerable populations.
This sounds really promising at a community level, definitely.
Yeah.
But how scalable is this model? Does the analysis suggest it can go beyond just a few neighborhoods? Can it get bigger?
The sources are quite clear that the social synergy model is designed for scalability. The analysis indicates it can be replicated and expanded, moving from, say, a pilot project in one neighborhood to potentially being implemented at a regional or even a national level.
And if you look at it from that national perspective, it becomes more than just a collection of smart energy communities, doesn't it?
Exactly. The sources present it as a potentially comprehensive answer to three major challenges Cyprus is facing all at the same time. First, contributing significantly to the energy transition towards renewables, and doing so in a way that actively supports and stabilizes the existing grid infrastructure rather than burdening it.
Okay, that's one.
Second, tackling social inequality by making participation and the benefits of clean energy accessible to everyone, regardless of where they live or what their income level is.
Right.
And third, offering a direct, practical, and sustainable tool for alleviating energy poverty, providing that immediate and ongoing financial relief to vulnerable households.
Okay, now here's where the sources shift gears a bit and introduce a perspective that honestly might be surprising to some. They talk about a business model masterstroke. It moves beyond seeing this purely as a social project to recognizing something with a potentially massive economic value.
Yes, this is where the analysis takes a step back and identifies the core commercial potential. While the model delivers immense social and environmental benefits on the ground, the mechanism that powers it all, that sophisticated AI software platform that manages the complex physical flows and the digital compensation that is identified as a globally scalable technological business.
Ah, so the real business isn't selling kilowatt hours, but licensing the intelligent operating system that makes these distributed energy communities work.
Precisely. The sources highlight that the company owning this software platform, effectively the social synergy entity itself, has a business model based on licensing this technology to other communities, cities, or maybe even energy providers who want to implement this model elsewhere, anywhere in the world.
And the potential scale of this licensing business,
Yeah.
is that where the big numbers come in?
That's exactly it. According to the analysis, the potential scale is enormous. The sources explicitly mention a potential annual turnover approaching 1 billion euros based on replicating and scaling this software platform globally.
€1 billion annually from software licensing. Okay, that figure immediately clicks back to the number we started this whole deep dive with, the 840 million euro. That falls squarely within the range of the immense economic potential the sources are describing for this software business side of things. It's not just a theoretical possibility. The analysis suggests that level of value creation is potentially achievable by scaling the underlying technology.
And what's fascinating here is the sort of dual nature of this value creation. You have immense social benefit happening at the community level, the savings, the social fund, all funded by an operation that's powered by software, which itself represents massive commercial value at a global level.
Yeah.
And obviously, a company generating that kind of revenue potential from a cutting-edge tech platform becomes incredibly attractive to major international investors.
You mean like venture capital firms, large strategic investors in the tech or energy sectors, maybe even the global tech giants looking to get into green energy management?
Exactly those types. The sources draw this parallel explicitly. This isn't just framed as a local energy project anymore. It's positioned as a high-tech startup addressing a massive global market need potential. How do you manage decentralized renewable energy intelligently and efficiently?
Right.
And this huge potential leads the sources to introduce a specific term, one you hear a lot in the tech world.
Which is?
Unicorn. In the technology sector, a privately held startup company valued at over $1 billion is called a unicorn. It signifies its rare and explosive growth potential. The sources state that this business model, based on the revenue projections and the global applicability of the software platform, has the potential to create possibly the first Cypriot unicorn specifically within the rapidly growing green tech sector.
Wow. So we're talking about a model that aims to fight energy poverty locally, while simultaneously having the potential to create a billion-dollar tech company that becomes a national economic success story for Cyprus.
That's the masterstroke the sources identify. It aligns social good, environmental goals, and significant economic value creation all within a single model, powered by a scalable technology platform. It's quite a compelling vision.
Okay, let's try and connect this now to the official national context. The sources provide excerpts from Cyprus's National Energy and Climate Plan, the NECP. How does social synergy actually fit into those national plans and strategies?
Right. The NECP provides the overarching national energy strategy. It outlines Cyprus's commitments to the EU's climate goals, things like achieving a 32% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from sectors not covered by the emissions trading system, the non-ETS sectors, by 2030,
Okay.
and also increasing the share of renewable energy sources, RES, to 33% of final energy consumption by 2030. Those are some key targets.
And the NECP, like many national plans, probably also details the difficulties in actually meeting these targets, right? It's not just a wish list.
That's correct. The NECP materials we have are quite frank about the challenges. It highlights difficulties in meeting those non-ETS emission targets specifically. It notes the urgent need to dramatically accelerate the rate of building renovations for energy efficiency, stating that the current pace needs to be basically tripled to meet the goals.
Tripled. Wow.
Yeah. It even mentions delays in major public transport infrastructure projects, citing the proposed tram project as an example of things moving slower than planned.
So these are the real-world hurdles the country is facing in its energy transition. How does the social synergy model, as described in the sources, help overcome these specific challenges outlined right there in the NECP?
Well, the sources show a really strong alignment. First, obviously, by deploying distributed solar and storage managed intelligently, the model directly contributes to those RES penetration targets. That's clear. Second, through its smart management and potential integration points, it can indirectly support energy efficiency goals, especially in buildings. And critically, it makes energy efficiency accessible to those energy-poor households who previously couldn't afford efficiency investments simply by freeing up their disposable income through the electricity savings.
Ah, that's a good point.
And the NECP itself identifies tackling energy poverty as a key concern and mentions a specific 3% renovation target for vulnerable customers, which aligns perfectly with the model's impact.
What about infrastructure? Does the NECP mention necessary grid upgrades or technological rollouts that would support something like this?
It does. A key piece of infrastructure mentioned in the NECP that is absolutely foundational for the social synergy model is the planned rollout of 400,000 smart meters across Cyprus by the end of 2026.
400,000.
Yeah. Remember how the model relies on those smart meters to report the real-time consumption and production data back to the AI?
Right. It's essential.
Exactly. So this nationwide rollout is precisely the infrastructure needed for the model to function properly and to scale up effectively. The NECP also mentions using sophisticated modeling tools like OSAMOS-YS in their own analysis, which indicates the technical basis for their energy planning. That kind of technical depth matches the approach seen in the social synergy model itself.
Okay, what about funding? Does the NECP or other sources point towards ways a model like this could actually get the necessary financial support, particularly maybe from the EU?
Yes, the sources explicitly connect social synergy to relevant EU funding streams. The NECP itself references various EU funds like the Recovery and Resilience Facility, RRF, and the Cohesion Fund, which can support green transition projects. But more specifically, the sources highlight a particular call within the LIFE program.
Okay, tell us about that LIFE call. What's specific about it?
The specific call mentioned is LIFE 2025 CC Prebafin. Now, let's bring that down. LIFE is the EU's main funding instrument for environment and climate action. CE stands for Clean Energy Transition, and Prebafin clearly points to private finance. The full title described in the sources is Crowding in Private Finance for Sustainable Energy Investments. Its objective is precisely what it sounds like, establishing and demonstrating innovative financing schemes that can attract private investment and be replicated at scale. And importantly, schemes that contribute to national energy and climate strategies, including renovation policies.
That sounds like a perfect fit, doesn't it, for a model that uses subsidies and loans initially, but really aims to attract that private investment later on, like the venture capital for the software business side.
It's an almost exact match, yeah. The sources note this call has a total budget of $7 million for projects across the EU, and critically, it offers a very high financing possibility. Up to 95% of the project costs could be covered.
95%, that's huge.
It is. This type of funding could provide exactly the necessary initial boost to pilot and demonstrate the social synergy model on the ground in Cyprus, making it even more attractive for those subsequent private investment rounds we talked about.
So the policy goals, the necessary infrastructure like smart meters, and even potential EU funding mechanisms all seem to be aligning here. But the sources also delve into something else, the political and strategic timing of introducing this model. Why is the timing around Q1, Q2 2026 described as bulletproof? That's a strong word.
It is a strong word, and the analysis in the sources is particularly insightful here. It identifies a convergence of several factors that create a uniquely advantageous window. It's really about leveraging political momentum and national events.
Okay, let's start with what they call the shield of the Cyprus EU presidency. How does that work?
Right. The analysis explains that during the period when Cyprus holds the presidency of the Council of the European Union, the country is under intense European scrutiny. Everything Cyprus does is magnified.
Yeah, it's on the big stage.
Exactly. Initiatives launched or highlighted during this time are seen as representing Cyprus to Europe. Now, a project like Social Synergy, which is innovative, it's green, it directly addresses energy poverty, and has significant social benefits, well, that aligns perfectly with key EU priorities.
So the argument is,
The sources argue that resisting or attempting to block such a project during the presidency would appear politically illogical and frankly actively harmful to Cyprus's image and standing within the EU. It essentially creates a political shield protecting the initiative from internal opposition.
interesting. And the sources specifically mention the power of Mayor Charalambos Prountsos in this context. Who is he and why is he important here?
The analysis highlights the mayor of a major city, presumably Nicosia, based on context, Charalambos Prountsos, as a potentially key figure. They point to his strong political capital, having recently consolidated support and secured a fresh, robust, popular mandate. He has significant political momentum right now. The sources position him as a natural protagonist or leader for driving the green transition nationally, not just locally in his city. So, presenting the social synergy proposal directly to him at this particular moment leverages his current political strength, his apparent willingness to embrace innovation, and his platform.
And how does the project timeline itself interact with this political landscape? You mentioned Q1, Q2, 2026.
This is the final and perhaps most critical piece of the timing analysis. The proposed timeline for implementing a social synergy pilot project involves the planning, the announcements, identifying participants, securing final permissions, all that groundwork happening in Q1 2026.
Right.
Then the actual physical implementation, installations beginning, contracts being signed, the system starting to actually go live, that's scheduled to start in Q2 2026.
And what else is happening in Cyprus around Q2 2026?
It's the lead up to and potentially the period of parliamentary or maybe municipal elections. This alignment is described as highly strategic.
Ah, I see.
By Q2 2026, the project moves from being just a concept or a plan to being a tangible reality. There aren't just announcements anymore. There are visible installations going up, systems starting to operate, potentially even inaugurations of pilot sites.
So politicians, specifically potentially this mayor, could stand next to working clean energy projects that are directly benefiting citizens with lower costs and funding community initiatives, precisely during the election period.
Exactly. The sources argue this provides concrete, highly visible, and extremely positive campaign material. It allows leaders to showcase tangible results and impact, not just promises or vague, long-term plans. It's happening now.
It sort of elevates the mayor, potentially, from just a local figure to a national example of leadership in green innovation and social policy, right when it matters electorally.
That's precisely the conclusion drawn in the sources. This project, with this specific timing, positions the mayor at the forefront of national discussions on critical issues like energy transition and social equity, granting him significant political leverage and recognition at an absolutely crucial point in the electoral cycle.
The conclusion of this strategic timing analysis sounds quite forceful, almost prescriptive.
It is. The sources conclude that this confluence of factors, the EU presidency shield, the mayor's political power, and that perfect alignment with the electoral calendar makes achieving political will for the project absolutely necessary. And the proposed schedule itself is deemed strategically imperative.
Wow.
They go so far as to state that resisting the project under these specific conditions becomes politically illogical for anyone involved. The political cost of not doing it becomes too high.
And do they suggest next steps based on this?
Yes, the sources even suggest direct, actionable next steps based on this analysis. Preparing a personal letter and a concise one-page executive summary specifically for the mayor, explicitly highlighting the strategic opportunity for him to lead on this.
Okay, let's pull back the curtain a bit more on the practical side then. Assuming the political will is there, how exactly would a project like this move from being a concept to a reality on the ground? The courses include notes on the proposed project methodology and also the system's control structures.
Yes, the methodology outlined in the analysis of the project idea social synergy notes is quite detailed. It's designed to be phased and, importantly, very collaborative. It's meant to be data-driven and participatory right from the start.
And it begins with what they call a diagnostic phase.
Yes, this is planned for the first 1 to 2 months. The focus here is on rigorous data collection to really understand the actual needs and existing resources within the target community. This involves conducting surveys and focus groups with residents and local stakeholders.
Okay.
It also includes mapping existing local resources and initiatives, things already happening, to create what they call a synergy map. The notes emphasize that this phase is crucial to ensure that whatever gets designed and implemented later is based on real data and community needs, not just assumptions made from the outside.
Makes sense. After understanding the needs, it moves to co-design.
Correct. This is planned for months 3 to 4. And this phase is highly collaborative, as the name suggests. It utilizes tools like design sprints, which are ways to rapidly develop and test ideas to translate the needs identified in the diagnostic phase into concrete prototype solutions for potential pilot projects.
Design sprints. Okay.
They also propose using something called World Cafe cycles for participatory prioritization. This is a method to allow the community members themselves to discuss and weigh in on which ideas or pilot projects are most impactful and feasible from their perspective. The sources even reference using templates from resources like the Nesta Collective Intelligence Design Playbook to structure this creative collaborative process efficiently.
So diagnostics inform the co-design, which then leads presumably to implementation.
Precisely. The plan then moves into an implementation phase, which is carried out via defined work packages. The notes show this visually in a workflow diagram. Now, the specific details on the content of these work packages, the exact steps for installing the solar panels, deploying the batteries, setting up the software, they aren't fully detailed in the material we have, beyond the fact that this structured implementation phase exists.
And finally is evaluation and then planning for scaling up. How do they measure success?
Yes, this is planned for months, 11 to 12 of the initial project year. This involves rigorous evaluation using key performance indicators, KPIs, to measure the project's success against its stated goals. But a really key part of this phase is using the social return on investment methodology, SROI.
SROI, how does that work in this context? What does it measure?
SROI is a framework, a methodology that attempts to quantify the social and environmental impact of a project in financial terms. It helps demonstrate the value created beyond just the monetary profit or savings.
So it tries to put a number on the social good.
Essentially, yes. By using SROI, the project aims to provide a solid, evidence-based analysis of the non-economic benefits, like the value of reducing energy poverty or the value of increased community empowerment, in a way that can be communicated effectively, even to financial stakeholders. This evaluation then feeds into developing a white paper and a toolkit, which is basically a guide for replicating the social synergy model in other cities or communities.
Now, this kind of ambitious project always has risks. Do the sources identify potential hurdles or things that could go wrong?
They do. The notes are realistic and list several potential risks. One is stakeholder silo mentality, where different groups involved, like the municipality, EAHK, community groups, don't collaborate effectively. Another is potentially low citizen participation in the design process or even in the ongoing operation. And then there are the usual bureaucratic hurdles, particularly around procurement processes, maybe.
And are there mitigation strategies proposed for these risks? How would they handle them?
Yes, for each risk identified, a corresponding mitigation strategy is suggested. To counter those stakeholder silos, they propose using formal collaboration agreements and establishing shared KPIs that everyone is working towards together.
Well,
To address potential low citizen participation, they suggest ongoing communication campaigns and maybe even using mobile pop-up kiosks to reach people directly in their neighborhoods, make it easy for them to engage. And for the bureaucratic challenges, they propose things like securing pre-agreed memoranda of understanding with the relevant public entities up front, and potentially using experienced intermediaries like social enterprises to help navigate complex processes.
what about after the initial project is complete? How does this whole thing continue and become sustainable in the long term? Does it just stop?
No, the notes include a clear vision for post-project sustainability. The idea is that the initial project structure would transition into a self-sustaining entity, envisioned as a collaboration hub. This hub would continue the work, potentially generating its own revenue through things like business subscriptions from partners who are interested in using or supporting the model.
Interesting.
There's also a plan mentioned to develop an open-source platform for the social synergy model. This would allow other cities or communities to replicate it with minimal licensing costs, really fostering widespread adoption. And finally, they propose integrating the model's implementation services into local public tenders via something called a supplier network, which would create stable demand for the expertise and technology needed to set up new social synergy communities.
You also mentioned something earlier called multidimensional intelligence when describing the control structures. That sounds quite complex. What does that mean?
It's the term used in the sources to emphasize the sophisticated layered control system that manages the real-time dynamics of the virtual power plant and all that energy flow we talked about. It's not just a single point of control, but rather a network of intelligent management operating at different speeds and different levels of abstraction, all working together.
Okay, how is that structure broken down? What are the layers?
It's described as a hierarchical control system with three main levels. The primary level control is decentralized and operates right down at the local level, maybe even household level. It's designed for immediate reactions to things happening on the grid or within a home's consumption, reacting in seconds. This high-speed local response is critical for maintaining stability. Then there's secondary level control. This operates at the unit level, maybe managing a group of homes together or a specific battery site. It can be centralized or decentralized just within that unit, and it focuses on coordination between neighboring components or responding to events over a timescale of minutes. And finally, there's tertiary level control. This is a global level, could be centralized or decentralized, that manages the entire energy community system strategically. It operates over much longer time horizons, hours or days, and it's responsible for the strategic planning, the overarching optimization, and ensuring the entire system meets its long-term goals efficiently.
And the AI software is the brain coordinating all these different levels, making them work together.
Exactly. The sources reiterate the core AI functions that enable this multidimensional intelligence. It includes sophisticated forecasting algorithms that predict energy load, how much power members are likely to need, and also generation, how much solar power is likely to be produced based on weather data, historical patterns, and other factors.
Okay, so it predicts supply and demand.
Right. And armed with those forecasts, the AI then uses optimization and load shifting algorithms. These are described in the notes as the real brain of the strategy. They decide in real time the most intelligent and cost-effective strategy for charging and discharging the batteries.
So the AI is constantly deciding, store this energy now or inject it back into the grid.
Precisely. And it makes these decisions not just to minimize costs for the community members by using stored solar power when grid prices are high, for example, but also to simultaneously support the grid's stability by acting as that responsive VPP. It's dynamically balancing the community's needs with the grid operator's requirements, second by second, minute by minute.
Bringing all of these complex elements together, then, the sources paint a picture of what they call a perfect win-win-win ecosystem. Can you summarize who wins and how?
That's the summary they provide, yeah. It highlights how the model is designed to create significant value for basically everyone involved.
Okay, so first, for the citizens, the members of the energy community, what's their win?
They get cheaper, stable electricity prices, protected from those market fluctuations we talked about, and crucially, with zero upfront investment risk. Big win for them.
Right. For the grid operator, EAHK, what's in it for them?
They gain a valuable strategic partner, one that provides real-time network stabilization services, makes managing variable renewable energy much easier, and actively supports the national goal of moving towards 100% RES integration. They get help managing their grid.
Okay. And for society at large in Cyprus?
Well, the model directly combats energy poverty, providing tangible, ongoing relief to vulnerable households. And it creates that self-sustaining, significant social fund that can finance all sorts of community initiatives and social actions year after year.
And finally, for the social synergy company itself, the entity that owns the technology.
They generate potentially significant revenue from licensing the innovative software platform that enables this entire ecosystem to function and, crucially, to scale globally. That's their business model.
It truly does sound like an integrated system where value is intentionally created and shared across multiple dimensions: social, environmental, and economic.
That's certainly the vision presented in the sources, a coherent, detailed vision for a model with significant potential to address major national challenges while also creating potentially unprecedented economic opportunity within the green tech sector for Cyprus.
Well, we've certainly taken a deep dive into these fascinating sources on social synergy. We've gone from that intriguing initial number, 840 million, all the way through the core mechanics, the social and economic impacts, the national policy context, the very strategic timing element, and the detailed methodology behind it all.
We really have. We've seen a model designed fundamentally to break down that capital barrier for ordinary citizens. It leverages innovative AI and virtual power plant technology. It promises significant social impact by directly fighting energy poverty and creating that community-owned social fund. And it demonstrates a massive economic scalability potential, linking right back to that initial figure and the prospect of creating a green tech unicorn based in Cyprus.
We set out to understand the key insights, the core mechanics, the potential, and the context, and these sources definitely provided a wealth of detail. They revealed a complex, very well-documented system that aims to address major challenges and create value on multiple levels, all at the same time.
So what stands out to you, listener, after unpacking all of this information with us?
Yeah, here's maybe a final thought to leave you with, something to ponder as you reflect on everything we've discussed today. In a world that's grappling with rising energy costs, the urgency of climate change, and persistent social inequality, could a model like social synergy, perhaps starting in just one city, fundamentally redefine how we think about building our energy infrastructure and supporting social welfare? Could it prove maybe that the most profitable innovations can indeed be those that deliver the greatest social good?